Welcome to Books for Success. Today, we're unraveling the insights from Married at First Sight by Gu Lingfei. Married at First Sight, Ongoing, is a 2,300-plus chapter contemporary romance novel. It follows the fortunes of two characters, wealthy Mr. York and independent spirit Serenity Hunt, who enter into a self-declared marriage of convenience. As they come to know each other, however, genuine affection grows between them, forcing us to rethink our romantic idealization of love and marriage. Who's it for? Time-limited romance enthusiasts, fans of contemporary fiction, anyone who enjoys slow-burning soap operas. If you find our content valuable, like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. Don't be shy about dropping your book suggestions for us to summarize. Let's grow and succeed together. What's in it for me? A new take on romance and love. Marriage, Gu Lingfei suggests, is a fraught topic especially for women. The question this contractual relationship poses, in her telling, is as simple to state as it can be vexing to answer. How can a woman navigate commitment without relinquishing her autonomy? Set in the placeless and fictional town of Wiltspoon, Married at First Sight looks at this conundrum through the eyes of the novel's two protagonists, Mr. York, Wiltspoon's most eligible bachelor, and Serenity Hunt, a fiercely independent woman who marries for purely pragmatic reasons. In the course of this blink, we'll sketch out the narrative and explore the main themes of the novel. How can two strangers come to know, or even love, one another? How can potentially explosive questions about money, inequality, and power be answered within relationships? And how can the tug-of-war between societal expectations and personal desires be reconciled on terms favorable to both men and women? Part 1. An eligible bachelor. Why do people marry? Love is the obvious answer. In Gu Lingfei's telling, love plays its part, but marriage is also a contract. Power, status, and money are always at stake too. And in Wiltspoon, the town in which our story is set, no one knows that better than Zachary York. Mr. York, as most people respectfully call him, is the inheritor of a vast family fortune and the head of the city's largest company, the York Corporation. He's not only blessed with extravagant wealth. The genetic lottery has also bestowed a tall, athletic frame and chiseled good looks upon him. As the town's gossip columnists never tire of pointing out, all that makes him Wiltspoon's most eligible bachelor. But the enigmatic 30-year-old hasn't just avoided romantic entanglements of his own making, he's also steadfastly rebuffed admirers. The Wiltspoonians who read such columns have turned over every stone in their speculations on the causes of Mr. York's suspicious singlehood. Perhaps, as some put it, he swings for the other team. Others conjecture that he's asexual, or impotent, or psychologically disturbed. No York man has fathered a daughter for generations. Yet the family is matriarchal. It's always been the mothers and grandmothers who ran the show. These days, it's grandmother May who calls the shots. It's time, she says, that Zachary, as she calls him, settled down, married, and had children. All his brothers have already had kids, all of them boys. Zachary is this generation's last hope to finally add a York girl to the family. There's no defying May, so Mr. York agrees, secretly hoping his aloofness will continue to deter potential partners. But he's out of luck. Grandmother May has already found a match for him. Analysis. In this first section, we meet the enigmatic Mr. York. The truth about his aloofness, which is hidden from Wiltspoon's inhabitants but revealed to us, is more prosaic than their wild speculations. Mr. York understands his outward desirability, and that makes him wary of those who desire him. What attracts them? It strikes him, isn't who he is, but what he has. His power, his status, and his money. This perception has colored his character. He's a man who can be distrustful to the point of cynicism and self-reliant to the point of loneliness. But no man is an island. Those who know him best know that his austere and unapproachable exterior disguises a softer, warmer, more obliging interior. The York family is a happy one, and Mr. York is sensitive to the bonds of empathy, loyalty, and duty that connect him to its members. It's those bonds that set our story in motion. Part 2. A broken marriage. Her name is Serenity Hunt. Like Mr. York, she had no desire to marry when we first met her. After all, she doesn't need to marry. She owns her own business, a busy bookstore near the town's college campus, and she's only 25. In other words, she's financially independent and time is on her side. Then there's her sister's disastrous relationship and ongoing calamity that would make anyone think twice about marriage. Serenity lives with her sister, Liberty, and Liberty's ill-tempered husband, Hank. When their parents died in a car accident 10 years ago, Liberty became a parent as well as a sister to Serenity. She had to, after dividing the life insurance payouts among themselves, the extended Hunt family left the sisters to fend for themselves. Liberty stepped up to the plate. It was her tenacity that put them through college and landed her a job at a legal firm. By the time she was in her mid-20s, she was earning a six-figure salary. Liberty was beautiful and intelligent, and her career prospects were rosy. Then she met Hank. He was a partner at the same legal firm. He was charming at first, anyway. They fell in love, married, and had a son. Hank promised to support Liberty and encouraged her to become a stay-at-home mom. She quit her job and gave up her financial independence. That's when he changed his tune. Hank started criticizing Liberty's appearance, especially when she put on weight after giving birth. He said she never did anything but sit around the house or fritter away his hard-earned money. Then he put her on a pitiful allowance that barely covered the cost of groceries and diapers. Even though Liberty's savings had paid for the costly renovation of their house, Hank refused to put her name on the lease. Liberty insisted on Serenity living with them. Hank agreed, if only because he could pass some of the mortgage costs onto her. But her presence bothered him. He could feel her criticizing him for the way he treated Liberty even when she didn't say anything. He took that frustration out on his wife. Serenity heard him shouting at night through the walls. She knew that she was making life harder for her sister by staying in their house. She had to move out. Liberty, though, was her parent sibling protector. She couldn't bear the thought of her sister being alone in the world. The only way she'd agree to Serenity moving out was if she had someone else to look after her. For Liberty, that meant a husband. Analysis. Liberty is a foil to Serenity. As we'll see, Serenity refuses to give up her independence when she marries, and it's this refusal that opens the door to the possibility of a happy union. Her sister, by contrast, fails to preserve her independence and becomes trapped in an unhappy and abusive marriage. Liberty's mistake is understandable. Having devoted herself to supporting others, it's easy to see why she would welcome the opportunity to be supported. The fact that Hank uses Liberty's vulnerability to press home his advantage makes him appear especially devious. But the point Lingfei is making here goes beyond this one dislikable character. Rather, it's about how the traditional idea of the male breadwinner robs women of their agency. As Serenity's friend Jasmine says at one point, when women believe the bullshit men say about supporting them, they are invariably left in a passive position. Part 3. Married at First Sight. Wiltspoon isn't the kind of place where folks from different walks of life mingle much. Friendships don't often bridge class divides, and people who marry into money are regarded with suspicion by those who already have it. So it's unusual when two people as different as Serenity and grandmother May cross paths. It was an accident that they did literally. May's car skidded on treacherous black ice one day and crashed into a wall, pinning the doors shut. Flames were already licking the gas tank when Serenity happened to pass by, and she pulled May out of the vehicle. The two women became friends. May was grateful Serenity had saved her life, but she also took a genuine shine to her. She liked the young woman's courage. Serenity was an independent spirit whose boldness belied the dainty prettiness of her outward appearance. She was, May thought, a perfect match for her aloof grandson. When May first brought up the idea of setting her up with Zachary, Serenity laughed it off. But May persisted. She extolled his virtues again and again, though she was always careful not to give Serenity enough information to work out that this Mr. York was Mr. York, the publicity-shy billionaire everyone in town knew from the gossip columns. May's persistence pays off, though not because she succeeded in persuading Serenity of her grandson's virtues, but because Serenity's situation has changed. She needs to get away from Hank, and May's matchmaking is the only way out. Serenity and Mr. York, as she calls him, soon get married in a perfunctory ceremony at the town hall. They've never laid eyes on each other before today. They arrive separately, sign the papers, and then go their separate ways again. The only evidence of their union is a certificate and the bundle of keys in Serenity's pocket, the keys to the apartment in a chic neighborhood she'll soon be sharing with the man who is now her husband. People sometimes experience love at first sight, but Serenity married at first sight. Analysis. Both Serenity and Zachary marry for pragmatic reasons. As Serenity plainly puts it, it's a marriage of convenience, neither more nor less. If Lingfei confounds our expectations by having her protagonists marry in such a decidedly unromantic manner, it's because she plans on exploring ways of feeling that are sometimes neglected in the romance genre. When she turns to love, it isn't the love at first sight kind that interests her. The title of the novel, of course, is a way of confounding that cliché. Zachary and Serenity are no Romeo and Juliet. Those star-crossed lovers know they're made for each other the moment they lay eyes upon one another. What interests Lingfei is how love can develop, slowly but surely, when two people commit to a union despite the absence of that spark we constantly search for in our romantic lives. This is, after all, how many people marry today and how a great many more used to marry. Or were they all unhappy? Lingfei doesn't seem to think so. To her mind, Shakespeare's tragic lovers set too lofty a bar. The beginnings of love aren't always spectacular. Or, as May puts it to Serenity after the wedding, sometimes strong feelings need to be cultivated. Part 4. Mr. York's embarrassment. Mr. York went along with his grandmother's matchmaking, but he insisted on two conditions. The first was that his wife wasn't to know his real identity until he'd assured himself of her trustworthiness. As far as she knew, she'd married a regular middle-class middle manager. The second condition was that his wife had to sign a contract he'd drawn up. It stipulated that the marriage would be terminated after 6 months if the parties failed to develop feelings for each other. Serenity would get the apartment but have no claim to any other assets. The ruse works. Serenity doesn't guess the true identity of her husband, though there are a couple of close calls when all is almost revealed. One evening, for example, she attends a party at the York Corporation's flagship hotel with her friend Jasmine. As they're admiring the lavish buffet, there's a sudden bustle as people turn their attention to the man entering the foyer. There's excited whispering, "It's Mr. York." Serenity, however, doesn't catch sight of the enigmatic billionaire. He's too well screened by his bodyguards. Later that night, she remarks on her husband having the same surname as Mr. York and asks him if they're related. He matter-of-factly says that their family lines crossed 500 years ago. Serenity heaves a sigh of relief. Zachary asks her why. She'd feel too awkward around people like that. She says she wouldn't feel comfortable in her own skin around so much money. For Zachary, it's long been an article of faith that people are always interested in the kind of money and prestige his family possesses. That's just how it works. Serenity, though, doesn't fit into this cynical worldview. She refuses his offer to cover all their living costs and insists on splitting things in half instead. Then there's the contract. Rather than arguing as he'd expected, she calmly signs it. Its terms, she says, are more than fair for a marriage of convenience. That stings. It's one thing to think it, as Zachary does, and another to hear it. Unconsciously, he expected Serenity to fall head over heels in love with him, or, if she only cared about money, to at least pretend. But there was nothing to rebuff. His contract stipulated that the couple sleep in separate rooms for the 6 months it covered, thus banishing all thoughts of physical intimacy from the relationship. He was more comfortable that way. The truth was, he was so inexperienced that he blushed if his wife caught sight of his bare chest. But it still hurt when she accepted that condition without argument and calmly locked her door each night. Serenity, it seemed, was singularly resistant to Mr. York's charms. It wasn't hard to see why, either. For Serenity, their apartment was a more opulent version of the kinds of places she'd lived in before. For the incognito billionaire, by contrast, it wasn't only a downgrade, it was bewildering. He was a fish out of water without servants and butlers. He didn't even know how to rinse the dishes. When he tried, he ended up pouring half a bottle of detergent into the sink and drowning the kitchen in soapsuds. Even the food regular folks ate was mysterious. The hash browns Serenity made for breakfast stumped him. When she bought him a bagel, he deployed his exquisitely refined and, in this unfamiliar context, absurdly inappropriate table manners on it. Whatever he did, it came across as awkward and out of place, childish even. Serenity didn't perceive the suave gentleman Zachary saw reflected in the mirror. She saw her simple-minded, albeit handsome, klutz of a husband. Analysis. Class is a major theme in Married at First Sight, and Lingfei is attentive to the way differences in wealth and status can make fellow citizens seem like foreigners to each other. Serenity doesn't really know how the other half lives, but she suspects she would be out of place in their world. Lingfei introduces a note of dramatic irony here. When we witness Serenity talking about class with Jasmine, an avid reader of romance novels, she denies the premise of such books. In reality, she says, billionaires no matter how dreamy seek out pragmatic matches among their own class rather than descending the class ladder in search of true love. Lingfei's entire novel, from this point on, will revolve around the question of whether Serenity was right or not. Part 5, The Rose Garden. When Serenity moves into the new apartment, it's all but unfurnished. Zachary, who regards himself as far too busy and important to fuss over trivialities like interior design, says Serenity can decorate it however she likes. One of the first spaces she turns to after the necessities have been taken care of is the large balcony overlooking the hills on Wiltspoon's outskirts. One weekend, she drags Zachary to a local market to buy plants for the balcony. She's an impressive haggler and gets good prices from the vendors, but her budget doesn't cover everything she wanted. She insists, of course, on paying for the plants herself. When they get home, she's disappointed. There just aren't enough plants to create the rose garden she'd imagined. Zachary surprises her and himself. When he says he'll go back the next day and buy more rose bushes, she surprises him by agreeing to let him pay for them himself. The next day, after Serenity heads to her bookstore, Zachary gets more plants. That evening, Serenity returns home to find the balcony filled with roses with large, heady blooms and intricate petals, exactly the kind Zachary noticed her admiring at the market. Truth be told, he didn't get them himself. He asked the gardener from the York estate to select a batch of roses from his greenhouses. But he didn't ask his gardener to arrange them. Instead, he leaves that to Serenity. One evening a couple of weeks later, when Serenity was watering the newly arranged rose garden, the scent of the flowers suddenly hit Zachary. The smell triggers a vivid memory of the roses at the gates to his family's estate. They were stunning specimens, immaculately pruned, carefully watered, and generally doted on by the gardeners. It suddenly struck Zachary that in all his years living on that estate, he had never once stopped to smell those roses or appreciate their beauty. Analysis. Gu Lingfei's online novel is a sprawling, ongoing project. It currently spans over 2,300 chapters, but Zachary and Serenity's ultimate fate remains to be seen. Before we take our leave, let's cast our eyes over some clues as to the direction their relationship might head in. Zachary's reaction to Serenity's disappointment about the roses is the first indication that romantic feelings toward her may be blossoming. He can't work out where the sudden emotion that swept over him came from here. As elsewhere, he's a closed book to himself. But we know its origins. When Zachary was watching Serenity haggling with the vendors, he suddenly stopped feeling annoyed with her for dragging him here and wasting his Saturday. Instead, and for the first time in their short relationship, a wave of sincere and deep affection washed over him. She was everything he wasn't. If he was a fish out of water, she was in her element. He felt that every movement of her body, every thought or feeling she expressed, and every idea she had was spontaneous, intuitive, and free. Letting Serenity arrange the new roses is also a small yet significant gesture. It's the very first sign that Zachary is beginning to trust his wife and respect her good judgment. In the final scene, we catch a glimpse of what allowing this trust to grow might do for Zachary. As he literally stops to smell the roses, he figuratively puts aside his cynical worldview and makes room for a new appreciation of life and Serenity. Final summary. Marriage involves many complexities beyond love. Wealthy Mr. York and independent Serenity Hunt enter a pragmatic union, challenging social expectations and romantic idealizations of love at first sight. Gu Lingfei foregrounds the evolving relationship of her protagonists, underscoring the idea that love's beginnings are often subtle and require cultivation, trust, and commitment. Thank you for joining us on this enlightening journey. If you've enjoyed our summary, consider reading the full book for a more in-depth exploration. Before you go, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and share this video with someone who could benefit from these insights. Until next time, keep reading, keep learning, and keep growing.